and to an increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is a moral imperative, an economic imperative, a moment of peril, but also a moment of extraordinary possibilities.
But serious question, how does a rotten, racist, unjust society such as ours have any moral standing to order other countries around? You ever think about that for a moment? Because if Democrats truly believe what they've been saying about America, then we are in no position to claim the moral high ground on climate change or any other issues for that matter. Likewise, why would any nation follow the lead of another government if it can't even master hosting a Zoom meeting?
It's a pleasure now to call upon the Prime Minister of Australia, Prime Minister Scott Morrison. Mr. Prime Minister, I'm not sure we're hearing you here. Yes, yes.
Your Excellencies, distinguished leaders, and esteemed colleagues from around.
Good morning to all our colleagues around the world leaders for taking part in the summit. I thank you.
They're even less convincing when they echo. So at the same time, look, you can ignore all their lofty verbiage, even when they're not having the tech problems, about saving the planet and global obligations, and realize just one thing. If you don't think of anything when you watch this nonsense, think about one thing. Biden's plan to cut carbon emissions by 52%, it's really just a plan to cut your standard of living. This is a massive climate con, and we have to expose it step by step. Now, climate con number one, the recycled Obama-era promise of a green jobs revolution.
I see an opportunity to create millions of good-paying, middle-class union jobs. I see line workers laying thousands of miles of transmission lines for a clean, modern, resilient grid. I see workers capping hundreds of thousands of abandoned oil and gas wells. I see auto workers building the next generation of electric vehicles.
Now, this is truly sick. Thousands of American workers are going to be leaving their once good-paying jobs in the oil and gas industry to go like traveling around the country, capping off the very wells that used to put their kids through college. That'll be great. Biden's climate agenda is going to create millions of jobs, all right, in China. Even the New York Times admits this inconvenient truth. Biden's plan is likely to be an economic boon to China, since the U.S. still relies almost entirely on Chinese manufacturers for low-cost solar modules. And they have increasingly shifted to Xinjiang, where the CCP may have detained more than 1 million or more Uyghur minorities in camps, where they face torture, indoctrination, and coerced labor. Meanwhile, Biden is engaged in his own form of torture by slowly hollowing out industries that American families have depended on for jobs and affordable energy, putting millions of non-slave labor jobs in America, well, out of business. Climate radicals demanded that Biden block the Keystone Pipeline, and he rolled right over. It was a cruel attack on thousands of American workers. Now, you add to that the idiotic decision to ban new oil and gas lease sales and all the drilling on federal lands, and you have an economic catastrophe on the horizon for our country just when we need relief the most after this pandemic. Oh, did you hear it? Well, that brings me to climate con number two, that the world is united in the climate change fight.
No nation can solve this crisis on our own, as I know you all fully understand. We have to take action, all of us. And this summit is our first step on the road.
I'd like to begin by thanking President Biden very much for bringing us all together, and of course for returning the United States to the front rank of the fight against climate change. We can build back better from this pandemic by building back greener.
I have a question. If we cut carbon emissions, will he comb his hair? It's almost worth it. But all the virtual hugs and the kisses and the high fives virtually, it gave way to the harsh reality that every nation, in the end, is just going to do what's best in its interest, its own best interest, except America.
We must be committed to the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities.
We in India are doing our part.
I'd like to stress that Russia treats its international commitments with the utmost responsibility.
In other words, fork over billions, or we're just not going to lift a finger on climate or anything else. But everyone's looking for a payoff. And in case you didn't notice, the United States is out of money. We're printing it and borrowing it, but we're essentially out of cash. With China, though, the ransom would be in the form of huge concessions on tariffs. And this will be terrible for working class Americans, but great, as usual, for Wall Street executives. And as for Europe, they've always been annoyed when our economy outperforms theirs, as it has before, during, and after the pandemic, at least up until now. So now, with all this opportunity for climate change reform, it's time to level the playing field.
Carbon must have its price, because nature cannot pay the price any longer. Climate action is also a massive opportunity for our economies. It is so good to have the US back on our side in the fight against climate change.
In other words, goodbye long road trips, hello carbon taxes. If you want to see where our gas prices are headed under Biden, check out what they're paying in the Netherlands right now. $8 a gallon. ClimateCon number 3. This is all about following the science. Well, look, if that were true, Biden officials would be able to answer simple questions.
What does your modeling show? How much will this lower world temperatures?
I don't think the modeling speaks specifically to what this bill in isolation will do.
Why are we doing this if we don't understand, haven't done modeling?
Because the jobs plan proves that we're doing more than just focusing on climate.
Oh my God, that's terrifying. Now, doesn't this remind you of the experts who told us that COVID lockdowns were the answer? They couldn't really explain why, but they basically were just saying, trust us. But unfortunately for Biden's team, we know exactly how much his grand plan is going to reduce global temperatures. Not at all. Climate czar John Kerry really swift-boated himself on that one. ClimateCon number 4. We should listen to the kids. It's their future after all. Now, if you're even allowed to have kids, well, they're going to be indoctrinated into critical climate theory, just like critical race theory. So if you enjoy being around surly teenagers with a know-it-all attitude, then you're going to love House Democrat star hearing witness today.
How long do you think you can continue to ignore the climate crisis, the global aspect of equity and historic emissions, without being held accountable? Sooner or later, people are going to realize what you have been doing all this time. That's inevitable. You still have time to do the right thing and to save your legacies. So my advice for you is to choose wisely.
But wait, it gets better. What happens when you mix open borders madness, critical race theory, and climate paranoia all together in one big bowl? You get this.
My name is Shia Bastida. I am a climate justice activist born and raised in Mexico. The climate crisis is the result of thus perpetuating and upholding the harmful systems of colonialism, oppression, capitalism, and market-oriented greenwash solutions. Solutions must be aligned with the fact that climate justice is social justice. But most importantly, all of these solutions must be implemented with the voices of frontline Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities as leaders and decision makers.
In other words, prepare to pay climate reparations, people. You're going to be poorer, you're going to be less free, and you're going to be miserable, all while John Kerry continues to fly around on his private jet. But there's a silver lining here. Given how radical these proposals are, Republicans, if they play their cards right, have a huge opportunity to grow their base by focusing on how Democrats' climate plans are going to add huge burdens to our middle class. As usual, minorities and rural Americans are going to be hurt the most. And we need to convince them that a return to America first policies is the only sensible way forward. After all, they worked during Trump's first 3 years, and they can again. And that's the